Hi there, welcome to Module 3, Lesson 34, where we're going to begin talking about multiplying two-digit numbers by two-digit numbers. And today we're going to start with taking two-digit multiples of 10 by two-digit numbers using the place value chart. So when we think about two-digit multiples, we think about of 10, we think about I can get to these numbers if I skip count by 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and beyond. But we're going to stick to just two-digit multiples today. So we're going to recall back on some knowledge. We're going to make a connection to a lesson that we did a couple weeks ago, Lesson 6, where we were taking two-digit multiples of 10 times two-digit multiples of 10. So I have an example here for you on the screen, 30 times 20. So a lot of what we're going to be doing today is going to build off of what we did then. So I'm hoping that you can see those connections and continue forward with those new additions of what we're going to be talking about today. So let's refresh. Let's do this problem or complete this problem here on the place value chart. That way you can see how this relates to what we'll be doing moving forward. So when we looked at a problem like this, we decided, okay, I might not know this off the top of my head, so what's going to be a strategy for me to be able to solve this? And we talked about how I could split my numbers up into factors, or two numbers that multiply together to give me each of these two numbers. And we want them to be 10 times another number. So for instance, 30, well, the only fact that I know of 30 that has a 10 in it would be 3 times 10. That's the only 10 fact that I can use to equal 30. Same for 20. It would be 2 times 10. That's the only 10 fact that I can use to equal 20. 2 times 10, or 10 times 2. And then we talked about, well, I can now kind of shift my numbers around so that I can complete this more easily, moving forward. But I said I really only need to break up one of these numbers. So it could have been either one, and there were several different ways that you could have done this. So for instance, we're going to keep the 20 as is, and we're going to keep the 30 split apart. So now instead of 30, it's going to be 3 times 10 times 20. And what we used was called the associative property. So we didn't talk in too much detail about the associative property, but basically what this means, if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, is I can take numbers and when I multiply and when I add, and I can rearrange them so that they better suit what I'm working with. So if you kind of look down here at the little guys down here, the different colored ones, so if you notice, there's 3 different color little people. And when they started, they started with the green and the orange grouped, and then the pink man left out on the side. But then, when they rearranged and they grouped them differently, they decided, okay, I'm going to group the pink and the orange together and leave the green man out on the side. So if you look at that problem up here, right here, so I started with 2 plus 3, and I was going to solve that first and then add my 4. Or if it's easier for me, I can solve my 3 plus 4 and then add on my 2. Either way, I'm going to get the same answer. It's just a matter of deciding which numbers I'm going to multiply first, and then what I'm going to have to do following that. So in this case, I could have grouped 10 and 20. I could have flip-flopped those and said, still 10 times 3 equals 30 times 20. I could have done this. Either of those would have been fine. Or if I had split up the 20 and kept the 30 as is, I would have been able to do the same. So if I show this first one right here, I would have said, okay, I'm starting with 20, so 2 in the tens, and when I multiply by 10, I know that means I'm going to shift over one column, because I'm envisioning making those bundles and shifting them over. So I'm done with those. And then, so I showed that, and then my final step was multiplying by 3, which told me that I needed 3 groups of the 20, so, or what is now 200s. So that's 1 group, 2 groups, and 3 groups. So then what my final answer would have been would be I have 6 dots in the hundreds, nothing left in the tens, and nothing in the ones. Now just to show you, kind of pull back on those, what we were working on, I'm going to show you this one now. Same process, but it's going to be in red. So I'm going to start with my 20, and instead of multiplying by 10 this time and sending it over, I'm going to first multiply by 3. So I need 3 groups of 20. Okay, did that, check. And then my last step, multiply by 10, which means all of these get sent over to the hundreds. So that means I send 6 over, which again gives me 6 in the hundreds, nothing in the tens, and nothing in the ones. So that just goes to show that no matter how I rearrange those numbers, I'm still going to get the correct answer so long as I keep those 3 numbers that I started with. So let's take this knowledge and our new findings of the associative property, and we're going to apply those to a little bit different, more difficult problems. Okay, so our first problem that we're going to be looking at with our objective of what we're looking at today, so I can multiply 2-digit multiples of 10 by 2-digit numbers, is going to be 40 times 22. So in this case, we're thinking about which one of these numbers is a multiple of 10. So remember which number, if I'm skip counting by tens, I'm going to reach this number. And if I think about this, that's going to be my 40, right? 10, 20, 30, 40. That's my multiple of 10, which means I'm going to be multiplying 22 by this number. Now, thinking back to that problem we just did, I need to split this into 2 factors, one of them being 10, that will equal 40. So what number times 10 gives me 40? Well, I know that's 4. Let me rewrite that real quick. There we go. 4. Okay. So now my new problem is 10 times 4 times 22. But I can rewrite this in a different way, because thinking about that associative property, 40 is not just 10 times 4, it's also 4 times 10. Now, when I group these to decide how I want to solve this problem, I could group my 4 times 22 first. I could group my 10 times 22 first. And then I could start back with my original problem. But that wouldn't really help us too much. That's why we broke it apart in the first place. This would have been what we originally started with. So, I'm going to be demonstrating this problem and this problem here on the place value chart. Now this is the same process for all of the problems that you're going to be completing today. So if you can get the hang of it here, then those problems that we do moving forward are going to be kind of practice problems for you. So practice along with me here on your whiteboard or your scratch paper so that you can get the hang of this as well. So we're going to start with this first one right here. So the first thing I need to put in the chart, no matter what, is that 22. So if I think about how can I represent 22 in the place value chart, I know that I have 2 10s in 22 and I have 2 1s. Okay. Now I'm going to multiply by 4. So I'm going to make 4 groups of each of these. 3 and 4. Then we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So check that step, check that step. Final step, multiply by 10. So when I multiply by 10, I know I'm thinking how many times do I need to shift over, how many columns, and I know that my giveaway, when I look at my 10, I've got 1 0, so that means I'm going to be shifting over 1 time. So that gets shifted over, and this gets shifted over. So I now have, we're done with those, but I had 8 in the tens, but now I have 8 in the hundreds. And I had 8 in the ones, but now I have 8 in the tens. So in this case, I've got 8 hundreds, 8 tens, and 0 ones. So according to this first problem, 40 times 22 equals 880. Now let's check our work as we solve this second problem right here. Solve the second problem in the chart below. So again, I'm going to start with my 22, my number that is not a multiple of 10. So check. My next step, I'm going to multiply by 10, which means I'm going to go ahead and send them over. Send it over. Send it over. And then, so I'm done with those, and I end up with 2 in the hundreds, 2 in the 2 in the tens. So check, multiply by 10. My last step, I'm going to multiply by 4. So that means I need 4 groups of each of these. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, did my third step, so now I'm going to calculate down here at the bottom. So I've got 8 in the hundreds, 8 in the tens, and 0 in the ones. So again, no matter which way I arrange these numbers based on the associative property, I get the same answer. Now what I recommend, but again, you don't have to necessarily follow this because either way works. What I recommend is doing this part first right here, the multiplying by 10 and then multiplying by that other factor, just because as we move forward with our multiplication, that is probably going to be a little bit easier for you with those problems moving forward. So just a recommendation, but again, either way works. Alrighty, looking at another problem, again, it's the very same process here to solve this type of problem. We're going to be thinking about, okay, which number here am I going to be breaking into 2 parts? Again, we want to be looking for that multiple of 10. So if I think about what 2 numbers am I going to split 50 into, I'm going to do 5 times 10. So my problem is now 5 times 10 times 31. But I know that these brackets here do not have to stay that way according to the associative property. So in order to make this easier on myself, I'm going to rearrange my brackets. Now, I'm going to show you just one way, and I'm going to show you with the brackets being around the 10 and the 31 first. So that's going to be the first problem that I'm going to complete, and then I'll go and multiply by my 5. But I'm going to show that multiplication by 10 first, because this is how a lot of your problem set breaks it up, is multiplying by 10 first. So I want you to get in the habit of doing that so that you're set up well for your problem set. So if I think about, okay, I'm going to represent one of these numbers in the chart. Well, I'm going to represent 31 first. So I've got 30 in the tens, 3 in the tens, or 30, and 1 in the ones. Okay, check. My next step, I need to multiply by 10, which means I'm going to be sending it over one column because it's just by 10. So I'm going to now have 3 in the hundreds and 1 in the tens. So I'm done with those. Okay. My final step is to multiply by 5. So I want 5 groups of each of those numbers that I just multiplied by 10. So that's 1 group, 2 groups, 3, 4, 5. And don't forget to use that original group as one of your total groups. So don't add 5 additional. Keep that 1 and have 4 additional to what you had. That way you don't end up with 6 groups. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I know there's nothing in the 1, so I have nothing that I need to complete over there. Okay, so I've multiplied by 5. I've done all 3 steps. Now I'm going to add them up. So I've got 3. So 3 times 5 is 15. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have 5 times 1, which is 5. Well, I know that this 15, there's too many here. There's too many. So I'm going to have to bundle and send over. So I'm going to create an extra chart here. And I know that is the thousands place. And I also know that I need 10 in a bundle, because I can't have 15 in that column. I need an extra column. So I've got 3, 6, 9, 10. Shifting over, those come over as 1,000, because 10 hundreds equals 1,000. And now instead of 15, I have 5 left over and 1 in the thousands. And I have nothing in the ones. So my final answer is 50 times 31 equals 1,550. My hope is that you're seeing the pattern here, that I'm going to first place my two-digit number. Second, I'm going to multiply by 10. And then third, I'm going to multiply by whatever that other factor is. Multiply by, I'm going to write other number. And again, you can switch steps 2 and 3, but for the sake of your problem set and being consistent, let's get in the habit of multiplying by 10 first, and then multiplying by that other number, whatever that other factor of your multiple of 10 is. So in this case, it was 5. So thinking along those same lines here, okay, we're thinking show your number, so show two-digit number, multiply by 10, and 3, multiply by other number. So in this case, we're going to start to shift away from that place value chart. Again, that place value chart is a good way for us to understand, well, where are we getting these strategies and where are we getting this information from as we continue to work these problems out. But we want to start to kind of creep away from those place value charts because they're not always efficient for us as we complete bigger and more challenging problems. So again, keeping this associative property in mind, I want to rearrange my numbers here because I do not know 34 times 40 off the top of my head. But I'm going to break up my 40. So I'm going to say, okay, 4 times 10 equals 40 times 34. And then I'm going to use that associative property and I'm going to move my brackets around to make this easier for myself. So instead of around the 4 and the 10, I'm going to do it around the 10 and 34. Well, if I think about multiplying something by 10, I know that means I'm going to shift it over, which means I'm creating this other place value, this empty space that I know that I've got to fill with some number. I can't just leave it empty. So in this case, I know that 34 times 1 is 34. But when I multiply it by a 10, I'm going to end up having to fill that space with the 0. So 10 times 34 is 340, which now means my problem is 340 times 4. Well, we just learned how to do these multiplication problems by multiplying by a single digit. So now I'm going to solve this problem over here, 340 times 4. And again, you can solve this any method that you want. It can be area model, it can be standard algorithm, it can be partial products, whatever is your choice of those three. For this case, I'm going to solve standard algorithm. So I know that 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 4 is 16, carry the 1. And 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So I have 1,360 as my answer for 4 times 340. So I completed this part. When I multiplied by 10, that's where I got this number. And then I just multiplied by 4, and that's how I got my final answer of 1,360. I'm going to set up one more problem. And this is going to be one where I want you to pause. I want you to try it on your own and then come back to it to see if you've gotten the right answer. Alright, so go ahead, try to solve this problem on your own, and then you can start the video back up once you've finished to check your steps and see if you got it correct, and if not, where we need to go back and fix those mistakes. So go ahead and pause, and I'm going to continue to work so that you can pick up once you're done. So I'm thinking about which number I'm going to split up here. I know it's going to be that multiple of 10. And I know that 3 times 10 equals 30. Remember, again, I want that 10 fact. So my problem is now 3 times 10 times 24. Well, I know according to the associative property, I can shift my brackets around so that I know what I'm going to solve first. And instead of 3 times 10, I'm going to solve 10 times 24. Well, I know that 24 times 1 is 24. And when I multiply by 10, I shift over and I create a column that's empty that I've got to fill with a 0. So my new problem is now 240 times 3. So I'm going to solve that off to the side here because I don't know that off the top of my head. But I do know how to solve it. And I'm going to solve using partial products this time. So I've got 0. My 4 is not just a 4, it's a 40. My 2 is not just a 2, it's a 200. So I have 3 times 0 is 3, or I'm sorry, 0. Anything times 0 is 0. 3 times 40, well, 3 times 4 is 12. Times 10 is 120. And 3 times 200 is 600. Add them up. 0, 2, and 7. So that tells me that 240, remember my problem here, 240 times 3 equals 720. Alright, this is where I'm going to leave you today. As you work on your problem set, if you need to come back and refer to this video, use it as a guide to help you work through each of those problems that you have. And good luck.